My name is Megan Donowa with the Florida Dental Convention Committee here with Judy K. Mausolf. How are you today?
I'm awesome. Well, you look like you're doing better than me. You look like you have green trees in the background, and we're having a little blizzard right now. So I think I'd rather trade spots with you.
The weather here is beautiful, so I think you're absolutely correct. But I really am so excited that you're here to talk to us about your upcoming courses at FDC. So I know you have two that are upcoming. Before we get into that, can you tell me a little bit about you and your background?
Well, when I was 5, no, I'm teasing. I've been in dentistry for a long time. So in the 80s, I started in general practice and worked in general for about 10 years and then worked in perio for another 16 and always on the admin side. And when I started my business in 2006, I was going to actually be a full-blown consultant doing all the typical things that a dental consultant would do. And I found very quickly that my passion, my expertise was really in the relationship side, in the culture side. So that's where I spend day in and day out, where people usually want to avoid the drama, the tension, the stress, the difficult relationships, the difficult communication. That's my playground I like to hang out in.
Yeah, so you said about 2006. So I bet you've seen relationships and culture kind of change throughout the years. And so how do you kind of focus that with how our relationships and culture is now?
Well, you know what? I think that stress is stress. So, right, and we perceive things, and what we thought was difficult at one time, hindsight makes it look a little easier, right? So we look back and go, "Oh, that was no big deal." But when something new happens, all of a sudden it's scary. I think back when AIDS first was on the scene. It changed dentistry completely. Before that, PPE didn't even exist, barely. I mean, we didn't wear gloves. Imagine that. And,
Right.
and now we're coming off dealing with COVID, and that's changed things a lot. So I think that things happen in cycles, and stress is stress, and we learn how to deal with it. And what I help teams do is help them not throw each other under the bus per se when things are stressful, and how to actually create a more harmonious or cohesive team relationships, even when the wheels fall off.
For sure. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Stress is stress no matter when it is. So, what do you think is the most important when it comes to creating that cohesive team and that relationship between each other?
Well, everything starts with leadership. So doctors, you're not going to like this, but it starts with you. Everything starts with leadership. The more cohesive you are, the more you lead by example. I like to say model the waddle you want to see, right? Um, it's either what you do, it's what you accept or what you allow that creates your culture. You're the only one as an owner or doctor that gets to choose what continues or stops in your practice culture. So the more aligned that your leadership team is, whether it be, it could be a small practice where it's a single doctor and they run everything. That's pretty straightforward. Then you don't have anybody to disagree with, just yourself, right? But you have to still lead by example. It could be a doctor manager, it could be multiple doctors, but the more people that are in leadership positions, the more time it takes to communicate behind the scenes and make sure that we're aligned so what we present to our team is the same. Because it's the chaos, the stress comes from not knowing. The stress comes from when we aren't sure that our leaders know what to do. I'll go back to COVID. How scary was that when all of a sudden it was like, oh, we're going to be closed, and no one really knew what to do or when to come back. And the confusion was very scary for a lot of team members. And we saw a lot of attrition in dentistry because of that.
For sure. That's almost like that saying where they say, wait until your flight attendant freaks out, then you can freak out. It's kind of the same thing, kind of
Absolutely.
lead by example and watch those people that you trust.
Yeah. So behind the curtain, you can freak out, but in front,
Yeah,
you can't. Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah, always have a smile on your face. So that's interesting that you bring up the leadership. So when we're talking about your courses, there aren't, it's not just the admin and the assistants and hygiene, it's the doctor too. So it's the entire team as a whole that you're speaking to. and trying to relate
Absolutely.
to.
Absolutely. And the doctor, when I work with teams, I work with them in what I refer to as like a culture camp type of couple day focused project with them. And it really is about building around what's important for their core values. And each office has a little bit different flavor. You know, dental offices are not all dental offices the same. They are very different based on the owner doctors and what they want in their culture and what's innate to them. So I help them understand what's important to them, and then we help to create that in their practice and help everyone get on board. The course in the afternoon is really all focused. The Rise to Success is all about how to build a united leadership team. I call it the we team, because we need to lead together. And there's no longer I once we step across the threshold. So here's what we've talked about. Here's what we've decided. And that support has to be consistent with all the leadership team members, whether it be a team lead, whether it be a location manager, the manager, an associate doctor, all the same.
Right. So you talk a lot about core values. So what if a team isn't quite sure what their core values are? How do you even begin learning how to start with the Rise to Success, finding out your core values to build on that?
Well, it starts with, and I always go back to the owner doctors. The owner doctors are they're the stable, the stationary, they're going to be there, right? So if we changed our core values based on who was on our team, it would kind of be like this. It would be all over the place. And on this month, and it's like different leadership and politics and everything else. We're going this way, now we're going this way, right? So when there's that inconsistency, it creates stress, it creates uncertainty, it creates chaos. So it really is built about what's important to the owner doctors. And then everything else is built on that, because then they're the ones who are taking this, per se, ship in one direction, right? This is where we're going, this is what we're doing. Then it helps create clarity on who actually wants to be on that ship, who wants to be going in that direction. We don't want to flip-flop around a lot, because then it creates inconsistency and indecisiveness.
That's great. I mean, that's really some things that you have to stop and think about, which I think is important. So when you talk about those moments of chaos and unknowing, what do you think is the most pressing issues that we have right now in dental offices in our current culture? And what advice would you give to start to begin to overcome that?
That's a really great question, Megan. I would say staff shortage is the biggie. I think that we've had the team, and most teams that I work with, and I'm usually either speaking or facilitating a culture camp almost every week. So I'm somewhere. And the feedback, or what I'm observing in practices consistently, is that they have their core team members that have been there, right? They're the loyal people. They've been there, they're thick and thin, and they're working through this. But there's been this ongoing change of some of the newer team members, and they're having a difficulty in some cases attracting quality candidates that want to stay, right? That actually want to be engaged and get involved. And what I found is the patient load was really high. So we were trying to accommodate our patients, and yet we didn't have we weren't full scheduled or full staffed to be able to accommodate it. So we're burning our team out. We're creating stress. So not only are they trying to work with less team members, maybe if you had a team of 5, you might be down to 3, or a team of 10 down to 7. And you're trying to make all of that work in that time and train new team members. And what I suggest to practices is, look, take a breather here, cut back, maybe don't do that extra column, do what you need to do so that you don't burn out your people who have been with you. Instead of worrying about just getting new people, let's make sure we're stable with the existing people, and that we're creating a solid culture, a great place for them to work, where they're not coming at the end of each day exhausted. Because if team members are always pushed to the limit, where they feel they can't get everything done at the level that they want, pretty soon the engagement level goes down and the quality goes down, because you quit trying. If you know you're never going to reach it, It's hard to do.
Okay.
So the staffing is so really figuring out what we have, who do we have for team members, who do we want to attract? And some of us are so fearful that we'll keep toxic team members on as well, which, and then you end up losing good team members because, well, oh, or it's a shortage. And that I find is more of a conversation than reality. When we start to put out really enticing ads to bring team members in, most offices are finding some really quality team members, but we want to make sure we hire a person that is excited about working in our practice and representing it well. If you have a very fast-paced practice, don't undersell that. Make sure that we're attracting someone that wants to work in a fast-paced practice. Otherwise, you're going to spend all this time training and they're going to be gone in a short time.
I have so many questions after hearing all of that because it's just so interesting to hear you bring up these, concerns that pretty much every dental office has seen at some point. So one thing that I do want to ask is when you're talking about a team member that may be burnt out, or maybe you see them in the process of getting burnt out, how do you intervene or how do you help them so that they don't leave, so that if they are a quality team member, how do you keep them so that they don't get burned out, or intervene if they're going to get burned out?
Well, and this is where it takes time. We have to make time to communicate and have open conversations. We have to take their temperature consistently. We have to be checking in and saying, hey, how are we doing as a team? And then even individually. So if you're a manager, do 5-minute check-ins once a month with your team. Hey, it might be you stop by my office. How are things going? Anything that you need. And it's not like we're going to do everything to make them happier. It's not realistic, but just to make sure that we're finding out where things are at and that they're comfortable. We create that open opportunity for conversation. So it's more of a temperature check on that. And then also being realistic. If you're getting feedback from a lot of your team members who've been loyal and who've worked with you for years, we need to be not just listen to it, but respond as well. If they're feeling like they're burned out and they're working too hard and it's consistent and it's across the board and they're exhausted, it doesn't matter what the doctor thinks, it matters what they perceive. And if the doctor thinks, oh, they got plenty of time, and I hear this ratio and it drives me a little batty. So many consultants will look at the numbers side and say, oh, you are scheduled appropriately. Well, numbers, they say numbers never lie. Yes, they do. It depends on what you do for dentistry. If you do a lot of smaller cases that are lower dollar amounts, you're going to see a lot more patients than if you do a couple large cases. It's a very different environment, right? So it really is based on who do we have. And honestly, Megan, a lot of people call in sick a lot more now than they ever did, because in the past you showed up, it was showtime. You came in and you tried to stay to yourself a little bit, but you still took care of your patients. Now, if you have even a little bit of a tickle, you're like, oh, I better stay home. So we're never really fully staffed. We almost need spare. We really do.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. A temperature check. It's almost like you kind of have to do that for yourself too. Just kind of check in with yourself and see how you're feeling in order for somebody else to help you too, I think is a big thing.
It's no different than our relationships outside of work. This is really about, we call it a work family, but oftentimes we don't treat it that way. And if these are the people that we want to have each other's back, we want to create a haven in our office, a safe haven that is different from the outside world, right? So it really is about saying, what do we need to do to make sure that we have a strong and healthy culture? Because I'll tell you what, the happiest doctors at all of my events are those that have had a consistent team throughout all the years. They're the ones who are most relaxed. They're the ones who've been able to achieve great things. They're the ones that they're smiling big. They're happy. They're not stressed. So it really is about a strong team.
Right. So when we bring up your course communication solutions, attitudes, breakdowns, and conflict resolutions, that makes me think of how you mentioned there are some team members that may be some bad seeds. So if you're a team member that loves being there and you love the atmosphere, but there's just this one coworker or team member that is just not having a great time and they definitely don't want to be there, how do you bring that to the doctor or owner's attention? How do you even have that conversation with the team member? Where do you go from there?
Well, and that's the hard part. Most practices don't have clear expectations or agreements on how they are to communicate with each other. They have how to set up a room, how to sterilize, how to do all of the those type of skills, but nothing to do with the soft skills. And so people come in and then they say, well, this is just who I am. They're just taking it wrong. I'm just direct. And usually when someone says they're direct, that means they're rude. And I'm like, well, let's not be direct. Let's put the filter back on. So one of the things that I share with offices, and it's very simple, standard, is that we treat each other as well as we treat our patients. No exclusions, no ifs, ands, and buts. But that starts with the doctor. If the doctor treats their team less than how they would treat their patients, then the team will as well. And if you set that standard, when a team member is treating someone else less than, it's the doctor or manager, whoever is responsible for conflict resolution, to help step in after, if the person has tried to resolve it. So let's say you and I had a tumultuous relationship. Let's say we had low trust, and maybe I was very rude to you, and I consistently like just respond quickly, and you feel like shut down all the time by me. Then first of all, I would say, I would create agreements with team members that they approach it and say, hey, Judy K, I'm not sure if you realize this, but when we're discussing this or that, you stop the conversation really quick, or so you comment on what you're seeing, right? And I know that you don't mean anything by it. However, it feels like, you're upset. So I just want to check in. Are you upset with me? Right? So we're checking that other person's temperature, and that gives me a cue as like, oh, I didn't even realize it. I'm sorry. No, Megan, I didn't mean anything by it. Or I could say, yeah, I'm frustrated with you. Or I could just say, oh, it's nothing, which means I'm blowing you off, and I continue down the same path. If I'm blowing you off and it goes down the same path, then it's time for you to go to somebody else and have them help the two of us work it out. And we would do that together with that person. So, but if they don't want to step up, and here's where the problem becomes. So oftentimes these toxic team members, I call them toxic performers, because they're very, very good at what they do. They're very skilled. So doctors don't want to get rid of them. Managers don't want, they might be their best assistant that, knows every instrument before they even ask for it. They might be their best hygienist who tees up all the treatment and they get great case acceptance, right? So they're like, they sacrifice that. And then they always tell me this as if it's a good thing. Well, but Judy K, if they ever did that to a patient, we would never let them stay. And I said, well, then why are you letting them treat your team like that? Because these are people who have your back. So we're going to talk a lot about that and how we help make some agreements and get on the same page. And then if someone chooses not to, then it's not a good fit for them anymore.
All of that is amazing. I mean, and I think a lot of the time is the communication part. You need the solution because communication isn't happening at all. So finding that way to break it down and find a resolution is kind of speaking up in the first place and having that conversation, like you're saying, between the two team members, and then figuring out how to do that, I think is super important to the dental office.
And we create, I like to make up words. We create, what does the approacher do? And what does the approachee? What are the responsibilities? And discuss that beforehand. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, Megan, but when you've talked about something before it's happened and you have a plan, when it happens, you're like, oh, this is easy. I know what to do, right? And so talking about it when there's not the stress, when there's not the drama involved, then you can be more level-headed and talk through it. And so when it actually happens, you have a plan, and that helps help everyone feel more comfortable in resolving the issues that come up. So it works extremely well.
Yeah. And it's almost like how you keep saying the main focus of both of your courses is really the communication and the relationships between the team, but that they're no different than the relationships that we have with outside of the office or with our patients. It's all about perception, and that doesn't just go away just because you work together.
Right. Right. And I love it because team members will go, well, we've worked together a long time. We take the filters off. I always say, well, I'd like you to put the filters back on, because kindness, respect, those niceties, please and thank you, you can put those filters back on. I'd like that.
Yeah.
That's something we all want to work with. And that's the key is most people just get stuck in their head. They get stressed and they don't even realize what they're doing. And then they have fallout from that. And when we talk through it, we make some clear agreements on who we're going to be as a team, not who we are outside. And that's the key. So oftentimes they go, well, this is just who I am. Well, outside the office, that might be who you are, but inside the office, this is who we are. And let's make agreements on how we're going to relate. Because if we can get rid of all that drama and buzz and stress with each other, then it's just patient care. And it becomes a whole lot easier. And that's the goal.
Beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing to really focus on why we're there. Is that patient
Absolutely.
care. Wow. So when it comes to, I love the sound of your communication solutions class. Your course sounds really good for the team and that team building and communication between each other. For your rise to success, for the systems and strategies that build high performing teams, what do you think the biggest takeaway that a dental team would get for coming to that course? And should the whole team come, or is it who do you really want to see there? Why should they attend?
Well, both courses are really about team relationships and how to, and I do others with patients now, but this is really about how we build that strong core team. And in order to build a strong core team, if only one or two of the team members come, they're bringing something back to the practice, and it's hard to relay that information. You're going to get the biggest bang for your buck if everybody goes together, and then you can debrief afterwards and talk about what you want to bring to your practice. So the rise to success starts with creating that foundation of leadership. And then what does it look like to have integrity or build trust in your practice as well, which is really important because that's what we have to be able to do. And if we have a high trust relationship, we can banter back and forth a lot more without getting hurt feelings. And so it's about how do we build that as well. And then also how to implement change, and change is out there happening all the time. How do we implement change in a less stressful way? So that really is about all of those things to help, and then standards, expectations for how we work together as a team. So that's really the rise to success. So it really is all team focused. Doctors, managers, hygienists, assistants, business team members. I try not to call them front desk because we were taught early on they don't look like a front desk, right? So, but it really is a great team course, and I get it that there's many courses that people want to go to, but I think you're going to find your most value if you bring the entire team. And so oftentimes I hear doctors say, "Oh my gosh, I wish I'd brought my team to this," and I hear team members go, "Oh, I wished our doctor could have been here." So, yeah.
So how would you, so it sounds like the whole team should definitely be there. How would you, if you were a team member and they heard about your course, how would you communicate that to the rest of your team to get them to come as a group, as a whole? How do you, because I know there are some offices that, like you said, some of the assistants go or some of the hygienists go and it's kind of all sprinkled. So how do you start that conversation to encourage your team to go to the course together?
Well, I think it goes back to, here are a couple courses that could help us work together better, that could help us open communication. I on every survey I get, it's lack of open communication. I mean, and keeping in the loop. So if I were the team member going back, I'd say, look, I found this course, or I found these courses that are focused on how we lead in the same direction, how we communicate, where it's open and yet respectful, and how we can work together better even when things are stressful. So this could be really helpful in getting rid of the drama and the stress in our practice. And I think that would speak volumes for most teams.
For sure. Have you seen any offices that have made dramatic changes just from simply changing how they talk to each other? Have you seen over your courses, hearing feedback from them, how, their work lifestyle and culture has changed through
So many. And so many is, what's funny is they go, oh my gosh, Judy K, we didn't realize how much this would help us in our home with our husbands and our wives and as well. But it really is about getting out of our head a little bit and understanding that the relationship, it's not, we get so, oh, here's what I need, here's what I need. Instead, this is really about how do we, like, for example, you and I, if we were working together, how do we make our relationship be the best it can be so that stress isn't there and so that we can enjoy working together. And we don't have to love each other, although I think I probably would love you working with you, but we don't have to love each other. We just have to treat each other with kindness and respect. Right. And how do we support each other? How do we make this where life isn't meant to be that hard? And how do we make it easier instead of being so judgmental? We've got a task. Let's focus on the task and let's make some agreements. And the Rise to Success also helps teams understand it's not about this is how I do it and that's how you do it. And then we have chafing. Again, how do we create that unified how we do it? Because a lot of the disagreements come from how we're going to do something in our practice. And that's from a lack of having a team meeting talking about what is our standard for that. If we have clear standards, it gets rid of a lot of problems.
Right. That's amazing. So how, you bring it all back to patient care, I think is so important because when you talk about your communication solutions and building the high performance team, it's not just for us and it's not just for the team. It's to do that ultimate goal that we're all showing up to work for is that patient care, to take care of people. Yeah.
100%.
Amazing.
Well, and you look at like, for example, Disney. You ask how many people have gone to Disney and had a great experience, almost every hand goes up. And you think about the size of Disney, they employ, I think, somewhere between 200 and 250,000 people. Boy, talk about a consistent message, right?
Wow.
And so it really is. And there starts with core values as well, and having that clarity about who they're going to be when they show up every day. And so it's really about making agreements and helping people become adults again as well, that we're not on the playground anymore. When we step across the threshold, there's a responsibility that we bring of ownership, of accountability, of treating each other with kindness and respect. That's the expectation. And when we do that, when we're not just sitting here all the time, well, I don't want to do this. It's not about what I don't want to do. It's what's the next best thing that I could do here to help with this patient care. And again, it always comes back to patient care.
Wow. I mean, even just sitting here talking with you, it kind of feels like a personal therapy. It feels like you're reading and you get all of those questions that you're like, how do you do this internally to help your team and help your patients? And I can only imagine how amazing your course is going to be just because I know it's so much more in depth. So that's really exciting and so glad that you're going to be with us for a full day. Is there anything else that you want to add about your courses that you really think are something important to kind of gather people to hear what you have to say?
Yeah, I think something that I hear almost at every event that I'm at is that some of this senior, and I'm not saying just older, but some of the people who have been in this industry for a long time have a tendency they can get a little jaded. They can get a little cynical about some things. And I hear often, Judy K, I came to your class and thought it's just going to be another class. And you know what? I walked away feeling hopeful again. I walked away feeling refreshed. I walked away with some new ideas. And I thought you couldn't teach this old dog any new tricks. And I hear that a lot. So I think this is really about, it's a reset. It's refresh. It's re-engaging. And I'll challenge you a bit in the office, in the audience as well. It's I think that they'll walk away very happy that they've come with some new skill sets as well.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to sit and chat about your courses. So excited to see you for get more of that information. So for everybody, we know that we have thank you again, Judy K. Mausolf, for taking the time, and she's going to be at FDC for a full day.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. So you can spend the day with me.
And I'm sure that's very easy to do with you. It's very, very engaging and wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan.